Brain fog, dementia, Alzheimer's, memory loss. What causes these things and how do we finally heal? So we've covered a whole bunch of subjects over the last few weeks. We've got a lot of people coming in with brain fog. I specifically get every day people coming in with brain fog and they can't figure out what it is. They don't know what it is. They know some things that may have caused it that they've done in their life. They have had a constant and steady decline over the years, or it has been suddenly. And so they're coming in, they have their work to do, they have jobs, some of them are teachers, some of them are mechanics, some of them have to have good memories to be able to perform their tasks. And when you can't, you feel like you don't have the ability to keep going and doing what you're doing. So some of them have had to leave their jobs and go on benefits and things like this, and it's hugely debilitating to someone's life. Now, I understand what this is like. I have family members who have suffered this also, and I have also suffered it myself. I do have delays in my own brain reactions as well, and those are slowly healing over time, but you can heal and you can know what causes it. Ultimately, is the way to heal is to know what causes it and how the body works and how these things operate, so that we can then get control of those things and then basically over time do the right things for ourselves so that we can begin to heal. Now, firstly, we have to know what causes it. Now, there are two main things outside of just standard diet and things like that that contribute to these things. These are things that we didn't do. They're things that were done to us. They're things that we are party to, that we have come into our lives. We didn't ask them. We didn't, invite them in. Well, in most cases, and we've had them, put upon us by two main things, right? Firstly, industry. So 200 years ago or plus, back in the early 1900s, early 1800s, late 1800s, we had the start of the Industrial Revolution. Then we had the Chemical Revolution. Then we've had wars, radiation. If you need me to jump out of the way, just let me know. Wars, radiation, pollution. We have had toxic waste fallout. We've had, the acid rain, which, by the way, is, just a very tiny aspect of it. That's carbonic acid from burning sulfur-based products such as diesel and things like that. But ultimately, lots and lots of toxicity coming into our bodies via everyday things that we come in contact with. So science, education, all these sorts of things, and industry have produced for us wonderful inventions, wonderful things that have come into our lives, that have made our lives easier, but they're highly toxic. Take, for example, you might live on a rural property and you've got a little bit of guttering that you pulled down off the roof, and you've gone and put that into the incinerator and burnt that off, not realizing that there's some of the most highly toxic chemicals to the human body possible come from just doing that simple act of burning some plastic, PVCs, right? And polyvinyl chloride. And so when we do something, and these are the thousands of things that we could be doing in our lives that are doing these things. So the food that we put in our mouth, pesticide sprays, herbicides, petrochemical fertilizers that they're grown upon. We have new cars. We get into our car and our PVC and our plastics and our leathers and things like this, the formaldehydes, all of the components of these plasticizers and solvents that are in these products are all gassing off in the heat of the sun, and you get in there and you fill your lungs with that, and that goes into your bloodstream. And then you've got rain, for example. It has over 200,000 undocumented chemicals in it, and hundreds of thousands of documented chemicals that are coming down every single day in your basic rainwater. And so we drink that, we have it soak into our skin, it gets on our head and our hair and our bodies, we get saturated in it, and we think, oh, well, look, it's only rainwater, it's probably the cleanest water there is, when in actual fact 200 years of industrial pollution and revolution have polluted that atmosphere. That rainwater's coming down with those gaseous forms of those toxins coming down into our bodies and our skin, and we take that in, and then it seeps into our brain, into our skin, into our bones, our marrow, our blood, and eventually through the blood-brain barrier and into the brain. So then we do things like, putting fuel in the motor mower, pumping gas at the gas station. What do you think? There's nobody pumps gas at the gas station now for you. Too many people were dying, right? So these are some of the things that we have to begin to understand, that these things are coming into our bodies. These toxins are leaching into our bodies in so many different ways. The clothes that we wear, the polyesters, the plastics, the dyes, the colorings, the fragrances that we put on, the creams, the sunblocks, all the things that we put on our bodies, and then the pills that we take, the pharmaceuticals, and then the foods and things like that. So there's all these toxins coming in. But what comes along with that, and actually that we were born with through our dad bringing his blood line into our body through the hemoglobin. So this is an important aspect, actually. You don't have any of mum's blood in you, actually. You have your dad's blood in you, and that's why you take your father's name, and that's why mum takes dad's name and gets when she gets married, and so on and so forth, so that the child can pass on the family line of blood and of the name of the family. And so that might be interesting to you, but what's even more interesting is that when that blood comes into the body, that blood is already loaded with heavy metals and toxins from generations and generations and generations. That blood is loaded with toxicity of mercury, copper, aluminium, cobalt, cadmium, nickel, all these different types of heavy metals. And when those things come into your body before you're even born, as you're being developed in the womb, that becomes problematic, because then you're starting your life already toxic. And we're supposed to be thinking that these little babies that come into the world are clean, they're full of life, they're going to start afresh on this clean body. But no, they come in with practically a lower than 70% functioning liver, full of heavy metals and toxins, enough to feed every bacteria and viruses that we give them when we birth them, and we bring our blood and our fluids into their bodies. And so there's your first thing, toxicity. Then there was mum and grandpa and great-great-granddad scraping out the metal pots and the aluminium, and then there was that whole thing with Alzheimer's and things like that, and that's actually legit. Aluminium is one of the greatest causes of Alzheimer's. So you can see where I'm going here with this. So heavy metals and toxins, particularly heavy metals, building up in the brain cells, the glial cells of the brain. Now the glial cells are called that because they're made from glucose or glycogen connective tissue. So glial, glucose, glycogen, right? Glycogen connected tissue. That's why when I don't eat brains, but I hear that when you eat them, they're very, very sweet. Actually, may have eaten brain, I don't know, I can't remember, but they're very sweet, and it's called sweetbreads for a reason, and that is because they're made up of glycogen. Now, when you were breastfeeding as a baby, your body was storing all of that glucose that came in on mummy's sugar lolly water kind of milk that you were consuming, which had tiny trace elements of fat in there, so that the tiny amounts of hydrochloric acid and bile the baby was producing didn't have to break down all that fat, and the glucose was the main building blocks for the body, along with some amino acids and all the other things that are necessary coming in on the milk, but very little in the way of protein and very little in the way of fat. Mostly glycogen or glucose that's stored in the form of glycogen in our glial cells in our brain and all our other organs, but mostly in our brain. So all our young lives, as our brains are developing, we're developing these cells called glial cells that are made of glucose. We should not have any stationary fat in our brain. Any good neurologist, brain surgeon, anything like that, they know that you don't have fat in your brain. If you do, it's like having a fatty liver. A fatty liver is a sick liver, and a fatty brain is a sick brain. Now I'm alluding to some of the other factors now, right? So firstly, heavy metals coming in, resting in the neurons and around the beautiful crystal clear fluids that flow through the brain, that all your neurons are firing the little electrical currents all around the brain. And this firing, the reason we get these little glitches in the matrix as we're trying to speak or recall something or a memory or this or that and the other, brain fogginess, partly is due to those heavy metals rusting or oxidizing in the brain. Now I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but I need to switch over to the other contributing factor. And this is when our brains get full of heavy metals, and it gets into little pockets, and it builds up in these little pockets. And I don't know if you've ever seen like a MRI brain scan or a CT brain scan, but that scan will show parts of the brain that have this white patching through the brain. Well, this is dead and dying glial cells of the brain. These brain cells are dead and dying off. And what kills brain cells? Well, you have to have a cellicide. And now a cellicide is a name for a dermatoxin or a cell toxin that when the cell becomes exposed to it, it begins to kill off or gives a die-off of these cells that are around the area that are getting leached onto with this heavy metals rusting and leaching out onto the brain cells. So if you could just see this and picture it in real time, the brain's firing away with all these little electrical currents, and then of course the beautiful crystal clear fluids, which all these signals are shooting through at hyperpace, are getting slowed down by the cloudiness that's created by the runoff and the residue from heavy metals that are oxidizing in the glial cells. So this is, in a nutshell, what is happening in the brain as these things happen. Now, there are things that can accelerate this rusting. They can accelerate this oxidization process. And, you've heard it said, oxidative stress, da-da-da-da-da. Now, one of the main things that can accelerate this oxidation process is, the first thing is acidity. Okay, now acidity raises oxidation rate. If you put acid, say take some vinegar or something like that, and you put it on a little piece of, raw steel that has iron in it and various other, copper and different types of metals, ferrous metals, these, when the acid gets on it, it eats into that metal and begins it to rust, and that rust leaches off and sort of bubbles up. I don't know if you've ever seen those videos on YouTube where people take mercury, for example, and they'll put it onto an iPad or an aluminium frame of any aluminium for that matter, but just give it a little scratch, put a little bit of mercury on it, and then you'll see the erosion process where this mercury is literally just eating down into this aluminium, and then after half an hour you can go back and just put your thumb through the, now I wouldn't touch the aluminium, it doesn't sound like a good idea, but you could break through that with just your finger, and the aluminium would just turn into powder, and just breaks up into this mess of a oxidized powder. And what's happening here is that there's a reaction going on, right? So in the brain, when you've got these heavy metals sitting around in the brain cells and they're clumped together, and you might have a little bit of copper here and a little bit of mercury here and a little bit of aluminium over here, and they kind of magnetize toward each other and they work their way toward each other, and when they touch, when they form together, or when they get bridged by this rusting leachate that comes into the brain cells, these heavy metals begin to pop and fizzle and get these little electrical reactions, and this creates heat in the brain, and it creates disruption to the neurotransmitters passing the messages between each other and getting getting their job done in a clear and a concise way that you would normally have if you didn't have brain fog or the onset of dementia and all these sorts of things. So we get customers coming through, they're saying, my brain is just not working the way it used to, I'm not thinking clearly, I'm foggy, fuzzy, all these sorts of things. And we say to them, okay, let's have a look at it. Here's what it is. Heavy metals resting in the brain, so on and so forth. Let's have a look at your diet. Let's see what you're doing. Because we can bring down this acidity and also bring down these facets, and this will go into last week's talk if you didn't see the one on digestion and hydrochloric acid and ammonia permeation, ammonia gassing off in the intestinal tract. If you didn't see that, then this relates perfectly to that, because I think I alluded in that talk last week about how this ammonia that gasses off gets to the brain and actually begins to disrupt brain function as well. So you want to have a look back on that one. We have that on the website, or we have it on our Facebook page. And this is a good chance, while I'm at it, this is a nice little kind of segue into who we are, what we do, and why we can make this information available to you free, and all of his other written information as well. Our protocol is the Medical Medium Protocol with Anthony William. We are Organic Nation, 245 Commerce Street in Frankton. We also have a website available online to purchase any of the products that we recommend, or things that you are looking for that are organic, clean, toxin-free, and troublemaker-free, so that you can get your healing going. But of course, we give this information out free, and we appreciate anybody who supports us so that we can continue doing this as these live posts free, keeping the videos online, and keeping all that free information for people so that they can come along, pick it up, and start to learn what they can do if they want to begin to heal themselves. So, getting back to the brain fog, dementia, Alzheimer's, and so forth, they're all related because they're all just different steps toward ultimate brain deficiency and brain failure. And this is what we see with the old people in the hospitals and dementia wards and things like that. They've simply just gotten to the far end of the spectrum of this brain failure, right? So the mineral deficiencies, the overheating of the brain, the lack of glucose to the brain to cool the brain and to keep it active, and then of course the neurological dysfunction because of the dying out of the glial cells and the neurons becoming disrupted and destroyed by heavy metals and toxins that are flowing in and out and around that brain area, damaging nerves and your whole basic nervous system that runs from the brain down through your vagus nerve, your trigeminal nerve, all of these different nerves, phrenic nerve, so on and so forth, and down into the ears. You get the ringing in the ears, the popping, the fizzing, and then eventually into the cramping and all the other aspects of the body. Headaches, migraines, dementia, headaches, migraines, and cramping, and various other neurological symptoms and conditions such as fibromyalgia, pain, arthritis, all these sorts of things are all stemmed from that same basic foundation of information. Now, there's another third aspect that plays heavily into this, and that is the presence of viruses and bacteria in the body. Now, the bacteria and the viruses harbor themselves in the filter organs such as the spleen, the liver, the kidneys, and various other filter organs. They'll sit in the thyroid, which is the third stage of one of the viruses called Epstein-Barr, and then in the gut and in the prostate for men, and in the breast and so forth for women, and then eventually making their way to the brain as well. And these viruses, they pick up and they feed on the same heavy metals and toxins that are found in the brain that are causing the brain fog and dementia, and they're feeding on certain types of foods. Now, I will say here, just as a bit of a disclosure, that bad bacteria and viruses do not like to feed on plants. They just simply do not like to feed on plant-based matter, except for corn and soy, mainly because those are highly modified GMO products. But and they tend to go for the protein or the gluten protein in those, and the high fructose corn syrup and things like this. So, but aside from that, most of the foods that these bacteria and viruses love to feed on, and I have to have a license to be able to sell food, and I must know what all my allergens are, and these are, fish, dairy, poultry, various different types of meats, red meats, chickens, so on and so forth, nuts and seeds, lupin, certain grains, glutens, things like this, nuts, what I said, nuts and seeds, yeah, various other ones like that, and particularly with dairy and gluten and soy and corn being in that realm also of pathogen feeding foods. Now what happens when you take the package off a piece of chicken, you're going to cook it up for dinner, you put your hands on it to cut it up, and then you go away for a little while and you come back in half an hour and it's sprayed, if you put it under a microscope, it's sprouted trillions of little bacteria in there. That is because it is the perfect growing mechanism or medium for which those bacteria should thrive, in the blood and the albumin, and also in the protein and fats on the meats and things. And in the same way, the number one food that will increase your problems with your brain power is eggs. Now, a lot of people and doctors and things say that we need the cholesterol from the eggs, and don't worry about people who say you shouldn't eat eggs and all these sorts of things. And I will agree that they are a wonderful food, but they're just not wonderful for our new mutated forms of viruses that we have today that we did not have back in the old days when eggs were such a great food for you. So this is problematic to say just, they're good food, just don't avoid them because they're good food. This is very, very naive and basic to understand that bacteria and viruses have been always grown in the labs for the last 200 plus years on egg. And so the same thing consists of in the body. You put one egg in your body, or the residue from one egg in the way of baking, cooking, any other form of ingesting egg, and you've fed your bacteria and viruses for an entire 3 months. So it only takes 4 eggs a year to bring total feeding and total happiness to every bacteria and virus in your body until they overgrow and proliferate in your body. Now when they overgrow and proliferate, because they're going to be there anyway, they're naturally supposed to be there, they're supposed to be helpful and beneficial bacteria and viruses. But because of the Industrial Revolution combined with the Food Revolution, like industrialized food, fats, proteins, increase of all these sorts of things, we've seen now an advancement in these bacteria and viruses. So we've all heard the term superbug. And what happens is these bacteria and viruses such as Streptococcus and Staphylococcus and all these different things, as they mutate and expand and proliferate in the body, and then they mutate into more what we call superbugs, right? So superbugs are forms of bacteria that have come in contact with high toxicity that they're trying to be killed with, for example, antibiotics is a perfect example, and then the bacteria, the ones that survived, have gone on to mutate and to become stronger and stronger. Same thing happens with viruses, human herpes viruses such as Epstein-Barr, HPV, cytomegalovirus, and all these different types of HIV and so on and so forth. They all, when they come exposed to, non-plant-based compounds such as man-made toxic chemicals, pharmaceuticals, all these sorts of things, and heavy metals, when they become over-toxic, instead of dying out because they need to be in the body to do their job, they just get stronger and stronger and stronger. So, for example, Epstein-Barr virus, which is responsible for most brain function issues, and shingles obviously as well, because that's all neurological, those viruses have mutated many, many, many times. Shingles over 30 times. Bacteria such as Streptococcus 50 plus times. There are 50 different strains. And then Epstein-Barr over 60 different strains. And these strains are differing in their virality or their strength, I guess you could say, their ability to do damage to the body, the veracity of them. And so these viruses are in there feeding on the same toxic heavy metals and chemicals that are floating around in your brain cells, and there they have to feed and they have to poop, and so they're pooping their toxic viral waste into your bloodstream. When this goes into your bloodstream, it travels to the brain. The brain doesn't have a great barrier. The blood-brain barrier in the brain is not overly good. It's not faulty. It's just not designed to ward off things that we have in our environment today, because they're all man-made chemicals that the body is not used to functioning with. And so it's great for warding off other things in nature and all these other things we'd naturally encounter. But when we're countering things that have been created by man to destroy us and to, that sounds weird, but yeah, essentially to destroy us ultimately, because our inventions tend to do that, as you all know. But because of these things, these advancements in civilization that we've had, it's exposed us and our brains and our seemingly impermeable barriers that we have are now no longer impermeable. They are able to be crossed at any time. For example, just glyphosate in your milk or in your foods, which is in everything today, opens the blood-brain barrier. This is used in medication to actually purposefully open the blood-brain barrier so that other compounds can get by. So there you go, it's opening every day at will without us even thinking about it, because that's what one of those man-made chemical compounds has done. So the function of the viruses is to clean your cells, but nowadays, because there's so much toxicity in our bodies, or in what we call our terrain, these bacteria and viruses have had the opportunity to mutate. They've become stronger. They are more ferocious and feed more readily on, things like hormones, adrenaline, heavy metals, toxins, radiation, all these things that we're beginning to expose more and more to. They're having a great big feed, and they're having to then eliminate in our bloodstream. It goes in the bloodstream to the brain and starts working on this rusting or oxidization of these heavy metals in our brain, lodging more and more of those nanoparticulates, or even smaller, picograms, femtograms, smaller particles, or even in homeopathic particleized forms as well in the brain. These lodgements in the brain then begin to rust through diet when we bring in things like eggs, dairy, gluten, corn, soy, vinegars, fermented foods, sauerkrauts, kombuchas, cheese, and fats and oils, and cooking in oil and things like that. So when we bring in these foods, our acidity goes up and our oxygen saturation level, which is required for healing, goes down. So we become more lethargic, we get more fatigue, because the absence of oxygen and of glucose creates fatigue, or is the byproduct of exercise and activity, making you fatigued, or lactic acid is a byproduct of those two things being absent. So we automatically get stiffer. You wake up in the morning, you're feeling stiff and sore, you're not really active, you're not flexible, things like that. That can be because of high acidity, low oxygen environment, and low glucose intake. Too high a fat and protein, and ultimately rotting fats and proteins in the gut that are being fed on by bacteria and viruses. Excuse me. Sometimes people come through the store and I just check around. But all of these things are working away in the body, creating this environment by which those viruses go to work, the bacteria go to work, and then of course the rotting fats and proteins, the gas off of ammonia created by rotting food and overgrowth of bacteria, leach through the stomach lining, through the connective tissue, into the bloodstream, and then ultimately up into the brain cells, where the blood is transporting that ammonia up into your neurons and causing that accelerated rusting of heavy metals and things like that. Now, what do we do to heal? Now that we know the cause and we know some of the factors that contribute to that problem, we need to know how to begin to heal. And some of the things that people can do right away that don't cost any money is to take fats, unnecessary and excess fats, out of your diet. I get a lot of people say to me, I don't eat a lot of fat. I'm like, really? Okay, so you don't have eggs, dairy, meat. Oh no, I don't eat a lot of those. Okay, so nuts and seeds. Oh yeah, I eat lots of nuts and seeds. Well, they're like 60% fat, right? So just cutting back on some of these things like dressings and oils and excess fats that you're taking in. Or if you're having meat every day or every second day, try cutting it down a little bit and bring it in just a couple of times a week with smaller portions. And hey Sue, can you just keep an eye on the shop? That'd be great. And so when we're getting sick to death of the problem of brain fog and loss of memory and all these sorts of things, we need to start to learn to turn towards not necessarily what we're eating, but what we're not eating. So we understand that fats and oils and things, and I'll actually go into that a little bit to explain, because people say, oh, but good fats, good fats, good fats, and it's like, well, are they really good fats? And if they are good fats, are they good in that quantity, and are they good at that time of the day? Because that can make a huge difference to how you feel, how your brain responds and reacts, and how far down the rabbit hole you go of Alzheimer's, dementia, brain fog, and all these other brain interruptions such as headaches and migraines and sleeplessness and insomnia and all these sorts of things. So when we're looking at food, we want to know why oils and fats can be bad. It's because the technical name for fat is nanolipid particles of fatty acid. Those two last words, fatty acid, fatty acid, fatty acid. So it's acidic. Fats are acidic. So when we bring in more fat through nuts, seeds, dairy, meat, any of these sources, oils, cooking oils and things like that, doesn't matter whether they're good or bad, we're bringing in more and more fat. We're bringing in more and more acidity. And so our acidity goes up, oxygen saturation goes down, bacterial and viral levels increase, oxidization of the heavy metals and rusting leachate in our brain increase, acid reflux, bloating, wind, and ammonia traveling to the brain and doing all those things, right? So there's the fat side of it, why it is not good. Why is it not good to have a high protein diet? Is because a high protein diet is automatically a high fat diet. Now, if you're having a lot of protein in your plant-based capacity, such as spirulina, barley grass juice, powder, lots of leafy greens, these sorts of things, some lentils and things like that, if you can manage the digestion of them, and you've got last week we spoke about digestion, so you'll understand that if you watch that, about why those things are difficult to digest, nuts, beans, lentils, all these sorts of things, difficult to digest. But if your digestion's good and you're able to digest those things, just bringing down the quantity of fats that you're exposed to, because everybody is exposed to a lot more fat than they actually realize, because there is fat in bananas, there's fat in apples, there's fat in capsicums, there's fat in celery, there's fat in every different type of food, nut, seed, spice, berry, everything, all contains fat. And that's not even the overt fats or the obvious fats. So bring the fat down first and foremost, and also try and eliminate fat altogether and protein altogether from your morning regime. Try waking up to lemon water and honey in the morning. Build it up to a litre, like a full litre, and drink that down. It'll flush and cleanse the intestinal lining, it'll flush and cleanse the liver, it'll blow out all your cobwebs and waste and everything from your bladders and your gallbladder and your urinary bladder, all the rest of it. It'll bring down prostate swelling, it'll bring down inflammation, it'll bring down all these things, and you're bringing in critical calciums that'll alkalize the body, strengthen teeth and bones, and begin to heal them from the inside by remineralization. Then after that, you can bring in some celery juice. The number one important and healing herb on the planet today is celery juice because of its high strength vitamin C, which combats viruses and bacteria and brings those necessary vitamin C's into the body, which our bodies can't produce. And then it's loaded, it is the most heavily loaded vegetable, or actually it's a herb, with the subset of sodium cluster salts. Now, cluster salts, sodium cluster salts, but they're a subset. They're not understood by science particularly well yet, but they're the critical salts that do everything in our brains, our bodies, and our neurons, and our electrical systems and circuitry through the body. So they're our electrolyte base. The salts that are in our electrolytes should not be sodium, like salt, Celtic salt, all these different types of salts. If you overdo those, you reduce your hydrochloric acid production, and it damages your hydrochloric acid glands that are producing those essential acids that are breaking down your food in your stomach. And also, one of the spin-offs of salt is that you produce a lot of ammonia from salt, because ammonia is a byproduct of salt when it's in production inside the gut. And so that's where you get that extra brain fog once again, from that ammonia gassing off in the brain and in the bloodstream. So all these things are leading together. So cut down the salt, bring in more of the leafy greens, your celery. In that morning period, I just skipped away from it, but I'll just come back to it now. You've got your celery juice after your lemon water, and then you bring in a detox smoothie, a heavy metal detox smoothie, because you want to do two things at once. You want to bring in antioxidants, and you want to take out heavy metals. So that's why we put in banana, orange, wild blueberries. This is bringing in the antioxidants, the vitamin C's, the critical calciums into the body. This is bringing in all of these things that are required. And then 4 things that take out heavy metals is spirulina, which is really high in protein. Actually 60% of the dry weight of spirulina is actually protein in the most easily digestible form, right? Free-form aminos. And then you've got barley grass juice powder. Wonderful. We've got a list of supplementation on the website. You can click into there, and ask me for a link to it. I'll put it in the questions there when you do go through and ask the questions, and it'll lead you through to the website, which we've got all those things listed out. What do these things do? Spirulina, barley grass juice powder, dole seaweed, Atlantic dole seaweed. I actually have some right here in a tincture, but you can also buy it in a flake as well, and the flakes can go into the smoothie, get blended up, or put on your salads or whatever it is that you're having, and these take out and bind to heavy metals and toxins and take them out of the body. And then there's the cilantro, the most furthest reaching. It's part of the celery family, and it has these critical sodium cluster salts. It has this ability to reach into the furthest extremities of the body, the hands, the feet, the tiny little capillaries and arteries and veins, and pull out heavy metals and toxins out of the brain, because the compounds go into the bloodstream and they travel throughout the entire body, deoxidizing, strengthening, coating heavy metals and transporting them out through chelation process, and brings these out of the body. So we're taking out the heavy metals slowly that have caused the brain deficiencies and these brain fogs and brain ache and dementia and Alzheimer's and all these sorts of conditions that are kind of like just the last end spectrum of it. So you want to take out those heavy metals that are causing those things. And we do this by bringing in fresh foods, as much uncooked as possible, as much raw as possible. And then you can have cooked food, sure, but bring it down, 40% cooked, 30% cooked, 60-70% raw. If you can do it, it's fantastic, and you'll find that your brain fog will disappear. So take away the fats and proteins, the oils, and bring in more fruit, all the way through the morning. And then in the afternoon, have your salads, a couple of salads a day, big ones. Put some spuds in there, put some kuma in there, put some pumpkin in there, all those brain foods, lots of glucose in them, right? Healthy, clean glucose that are going to the brain. Now, we can live without fat in our bloodstream permanently, but we cannot live for any length of time. In fact, if the brain goes without glucose for 5 minutes, you are considered brain dead, right? Even though that the brain is actually able to function off a little bit of the glucose that it has stored in itself. But you keep glucose away from the brain. That's why when someone drinks alcohol, they get all slurry in their speech and you know, start stumbling and things like that. That's their brain dying, brain cells dying, because they're being cut off from glucose supply in the bloodstream. This is what alcohol does. So hopefully that's been helpful. We have heaps of information on how to heal. There are certain supplements, and I'm just going to flip the camera around and show you a couple of things. Vitamin C, get on your vitamin C for your brain. Okay, we've got spirulina and barley grass juice powder. And I always talk to people about B12, zinc, which by the way we have more coming in. We're just a little bit low at the moment. We have more coming in, and then of course the magnesium glycinate. These are critical elements for healing, and of course there are many more. Antiviral L-lysine, curcumin for inflammatory, and then of course MSM as well for that, and we'll put those two together. And then you've got EPA, DHA, which are critical omega-3 fatty acids, which are required, you know, minutely for the body, the things that we can't produce ourselves, and some of the amino acids that we also need, methylfolate, and then of course your 5-HTP. In the celery force we have, you know, your, what have we got here, the ones that I'm trying to think of is, oh yeah, inositol, L-glutamine, and taurine. These are another of the 8 essential aminos that the body doesn't produce. So that's 5 of them right there, 5 or 6 of them right there. And then you've got your glutathione, once again, fantastic there. But lots and lots of really good products. And then we also have, you know, all of these tinctures through here, which you can get in tea form. And in fact, I'll just quickly show you all the teas, which you can get down here. Everything on this shelf through here, most of them are herbal teas, right? So the cat's claw, lemon balm, you know, dandelion leaf, dandelion root, and you know, all of these fantastic ones like lavender, lemon balm, eyebright, fantastic elderflower leaf, you know, echinacea, all these different ones. So we've got them all, and if you get the opportunity, jump online, check out our 3,000 plus products online, and the information's free. Just click on some of the questions down here, we'll fire the information back. You can even discuss and talk these things with me directly. I'll answer any of your questions that come through, and I'll point you in the right direction for the information you need. I get lots of people watching the video and then they say, what do I need to do to heal? And really, the information's in the video, but we have the written information as well. So please, if you're going to ask the question, please watch the video through to the end. It actually gives you all of the secrets that you can begin doing. It doesn't give you the nitty-gritty little points, but it does give you a lot of the information that you need to begin to heal. I get people saying to me, okay, I see that you said you can't eat eggs on there and dairy and so on and so forth, and they say, but can I have my eggs? And I'm like, well, you can do whatever you like, because it's your life. But look, you either trust what I'm saying or you don't, and if you mix it up with other information, I can't promise you that it's going to work as well as if you put it into action in the protocol that I'm showing you. Now, you know, you can mix it up if you want, but then if you come back and say, hey, the thing that you said to me doesn't work, I'm going to say, well, did you do it according to the way that we said it? Because if you don't, you've got to remember that details matter. The little tweaks and changes and the things, steering away from the things that you've heard, such as all the fermented foods and things like that, the eggs and dairy and all the things you've been told are good, like yogurt. It's a disaster, right? You want brain fog? Eat yogurt. Why? Because it's fermented, and it's because it's full of fat and sugar and all these sorts of things, right? So these are going to increase your symptoms. Hey, look, I've really enjoyed chatting with you guys today. Please, if you like this, share it with someone that you know and that you love and that you want to heal or to get the opportunity to heal. And if you want any information, talk to me directly on here. Comment. I don't care whether they're good or bad comments. I can handle them. Got big shoulders. I've been through it all. I have the answers for you, and if I don't, I'm going to say, I don't know, right? So it's about being honest. I'm not here to push a product. A lot of people say that you're just pushing your products, da-da-da-da-da. No, I recommend some clean supplements, and I don't make much money from any of them, the food or all these sorts of things. I'm here to run a business. I need to run a business, but my most important thing and my passion that drives me in this is to get you well and to make sure that you have the right information in a sea of information out there that is so hard to wade your way through. I've done all that work for you, and of course we have our way of knowing, and you just explain a couple of your symptoms to me. I'll tell you what it is, and I'll pass you on that information. You can go and research that for yourself and put into action some of those protocols and supplements and things that we recommend. I don't care where you get them from, so long as you get them and you get a clean batch of them, because so much of it out there is just to make money, not to make friends or not to make people healthy and well. I can tell you that now. So I've done all that work. I know the companies that do a good job, and I know the products that are great, and I'll only ever tell you about them because they are the ones that will help you to heal quickly. Okay, now you can do it all on food if you want. You just put in good food, clean food, organic food, spray feed, wherever you can get it out of your own garden is the best. But you're still going to be devoid of some of those nutrients, vitamins and minerals such as zinc, magnesium and B12 that we do not get nowadays much from our food. So I do highly recommend dosing up on those things. I have a heap more of them. If they're out of stock on the website, I have a heap more of them coming. We do have a lot of stock, as I've showed you just up here. We are piled to the brim. We've got more coming in and lots of back stock as well. So, been a pleasure talking to you. I will catch you again next Saturday with another really interesting and important live for you guys so that you can learn and grow and heal. And I look forward to seeing you again next week. Cheers, guys. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Thanks very much.